They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now, you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
So something occurred to me today.
Which was?
Colossal Boy's costume is always stupid. 45 years and Colossal Boy's costume is always stupid.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think they set themselves up for that because when, what was the one that we read this week? 305, I believe. Yeah, with Mon-El. I mean, he had a really crappy costume as well when he was Marvel Lad or Legionnaire Lemon.
I like the Marvel Lad.
It's a really crappy costume, but you know they kind of set themselves up for this weird unitard future space. I mean, it comes from this idea in the 1950s and 60s that everyone in the future would wear these jumpsuits,
right. And
so they have to go with this jumpsuit theme. But I think somehow in the 60s, some artist, I don't know if it's Plastino or who, but they got into this weird notion that you still had to have, even in the future, like pirate boots and
flared shoulders,
shoulder pads and a big collar. And I think the combination of those two things is what led to the Legion of Superheroes.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just a horrible mess.
Yes, it is.
Adventure Comics number 303, The Fantastic Spy, published December 1962, written by Jerry Siegel with art by John Forte. Is the newest Legionnaire actually a spy for an alien overlord?
You'll never guess the identity of the Fantastic Spy.
I bet I will, because all the clues are there. Did you catch them? Ting! First of all, Matthew, I need to know.
Yes.
What the heck is fourth dimensional surgery?
Well, you know how you go to the hospital and the doctor takes a slicey thing and slices into your flesh, and then you heal? Fourth dimensional surgery theoretically uses the fourth dimension, which is time by definition, to insert or remove things. And I think what it means is it takes little capsules and inserts them into your body to promote heat. Inserts them into your body to promote healing,
right?
But it does so by distending them through the time stream, so they're in you and not in you all at once, and you don't have to be sliced open.
Yeah, I know a lot of people think fourth dimension is time, but every time I look up fourth dimension, just to double check, it always says a postulated spatial dimension additional to those determining length, area, and volume. And then if you look on the wiki page, it says that it is the geometry of space-time is non-Euclidean and is profoundly different from the popularized fourth dimension by Hinton. So yeah, I like to think when I'm reading through this, I like to think that, hey, fourth dimension it's just slightly out of phase with this time stream. And therefore they're able to do this kind of, they're able to do this kind of surgery without cutting you open, which, if you think about it, in 1960, so fourth dimension physics and all this stuff is around. The special theory of relativity and all these things with Einstein are going on.
Right.
But if you think about it, in Adventure Comics 303, from all the way in 1962, they're talking about that surgery that's non-invasive, where like when you're having your appendix cut out or your gallbladder, they don't have to gash you open. They just make this little tiny incision and they stick their things in there and do all the things they need to do and pop it out. And I think that's pretty crazy.
But this is even better because instead of removing things, they just stick a capsule inside your body that heals you.
Yeah, in the place that hurts. But that's really important, though, for this story to go forward. So the next thing we do is this issue introduces us to, what now, the 14th member of the Legion of Superheroes?
Sounds right.
Matter Eater Lad. While Sun Boy While Sunboy and Lightning Lad were recuperating, they inducted Matter Eater Lad into the Legion of Superheroes. Now, Matthew?
15th member of the Legion of Superheroes. Bouncing Boy is 14th.
Okay. So, 15th member of the Legion of Superheroes. Matthew, please tell us about Matter Eater Lad.
All right. Matter Eater Lad, like many Legionnaires, doesn't have superpowers so much as he comes from a race of people who have unique abilities. The same is true of Cosmic Boy from Planet Braille. The same is true of Shrinking Violet from Planet Imps.
Oh, and Triplicate Girl is the same way.
Yeah, from Karg, spelled with either 2 or 3 G's, depending on what year it is. But on Tenzel's planet Bismol...
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute.
Microbes made all of the food poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
And Lamarck is a big deal in the 1960s, I believe, because the people of Bismol, rather than starve to death, evolved the ability to eat things that weren't food and subsist off of other types of matter.
Yeah, so like they can eat styrofoam and steel, and it all tastes like chicken.
And in his first appearance here to demonstrate his powers, Matter Eater Lad grabs a ray gun. This here ray gun sure does taste good.
Yum, yum.
French fried potato chips with that. Yum.
But can he eat regular food, or is he always just eating whatever is around? Like at Thanksgiving dinner, do you just set out the silverware for Matter Eater Lad, and you don't have to worry about turkey for him?
It's a running gag. We've seen him eat regular food. I know we saw him eat pressed elvabird breast at one point.
Okay.
But he also, eats whatever he wants. At one point, he's like, blah, this tastes like stale crankcase oil. Is it too much to ask for a fresh pot of crankcase oil?
That's funny. That's funny.
And that's the thing about it, is it's a power that, even in this context, is ludicrous. It is utterly bug nuts, and yet it's so incredibly, it's rolled out, it's really cute, it's really charming, and of course in a couple of issues it becomes a real problem, which we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to
305 or 306, but
so it's really interesting,
cool, and he has the best costume of the Adventure era Legionnaires.
I would say in this time period, yes. And just to mention the planet Bismol, I mean, everyone thinks Pepto-Bismol. And rightly so, because Pepto-Bismol, in its name, the pink stuff, was introduced in 1900. So this stuff had already been around for 65 years, 62 years. Yeah, and even earlier than that, they had discovered that you could use whatever the chemical formula is for the Bismol part.
Bismuth subsalicylate.
Yes, that had been prescribed for a long time.
Yeah, you can chew on it.
And you want to know what else is cool about it? If you light it with a blowtorch, it turns into a goldish metal.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what's even more disturbing about it?
What's that?
If you swallow it, it will turn the effluvium coming out of your body dead black. And
and
you think you're dying.
It'll also turn your tongue black as well.
I cannot stand that stuff.
Is it because of the taste or the chalkiness, or what's the deal?
It's the after effect.
Oh, okay. I don't mind. I don't mind the black stool. I mean, that's not a big deal.
It is terrifying.
But when you look in the mirror and your tongue is black and you're like, bah, and it won't go away. It's kind of like the first time when you have a young child, a baby child, and you're feeding them things and you give them like tricks. And everything comes out neon green and you freak out.
The dyes. But the thing about it is that Pepto-Bismol is a really funny joke in this context. But it's one of those things that it has never been called out. I cannot think of, please, if you are listening right now and you can correct me, feel free to correct me because I'd love to read it. They've never called out that joke.
No.
So it's one of those moments that I think is a remarkable show of restraint on the part of creators over the last 45 years. Although I believe at one point we find that the capital of Bismol is in fact the city of Pepto.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, but that may not be until the Volume 4 Legion, and since that timeline doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Why is this issue called The Fantastic Spy?
Well, the Legion quickly discovers, after their new member joins, that somehow news of their missions is getting out, and the Science Police Commissioner is very mad that for instance, a shipment of Energite the most valuable mineral in the world goes missing.
These are things that, when I read these things, like Energite is the most valuable metal in the universe, I'm like, how many more times has DC ever used Energite in their tales?
Energite.
Again, just like Tom Tanner.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're getting away. The Legion themselves are no longer a one-panel, one-shot MacGuffin as they were. But the stories are still full of it.
Well, and that's one of the things that I really like about Adventure Comics 303, because the Legion of Superheroes get their big second story arc here. And as we'll see in some other issues, they're not the backup story. In future issues of Adventure Comics, they become the lead story. And I think that is really cool.
It is fascinating to watch. Interestingly, and I found this, I had to go look this up. They reference the fact that the Energite that is stolen is being transported in, and Cosmic Boy describes it as an old, dilapidated Sputnik.
Yes.
And Sputnik is, in fact, the Russian word for satellite.
Right. This is the very first satellite that went up.
In 1962. Well, 57 was when they actually launched the first Sputnik.
Right.
But an old, damaged Sputnik. I don't believe in 62 there were any other satellites. So they use the term Sputnik here as meaning satellite.
Oh, I just thought that they just meant the old Sputnik. They actually were trying to recreate the old Sputnik satellite because it would still be floating out there. And
why would they do that now? That thing crashed to Earth in 1961.
Well, especially in the 60s, too, because you are still in the height of Cold War fever. And to use a communist word like Sputnik would get you into big trouble.
I'm wondering if if we are to take that as an indicator that the future no longer has such conflict.
It would be nice.
I would, but
it is pretty cool that, yes, in the future, that the United Federation of Planets is all united, and everyone on planet Earth is united as well. I mean, we will find out in future adventures about the xenophobe group led by Earthman.
Yeah. Not the first xenophobe group either, but yeah.
No, but I do think it's nice that, yes, in the future we can have essentially a utopian society.
But where everyone gets along.
But you got to be careful. There might be a spy. So the first one is they have their meeting, and Cosmic Boy is like, here's our plan. And then somebody comes and steals it, and they're like, uh-oh, we must have a spy in our midst. So let's turn out the lights.
Dressing down from the SPC chief, whose helmet is clearly made of balloons from a child's birthday
Their
party.
next plan is to turn off all the lights and just use audio.
Which cracks me up. I'm like,
nobody will be able to read our lips in the dark.
They won't be able to see us. Now, it is a beautiful series of panels, and it's interesting to really look at this and see John Fort drawing each Legionnaire and being able to tell which Legionnaire is which in an entirely black shadow. I love that.
Yeah.
Even
that
if the hairstyle is there.
That plan gets thwarted because while they're traveling through the center of the Earth and they're taking their chill pills, someone comes along and steals the Doomsday device, which is never used by the way.
Right. The Doomsday bomb is stolen from Chameleon Boy's purse.
And then, you have to read the book, kids. And then their final thing is they have to take this telepath 100 million years into the future when the Earth is about to die, because he's basically just going to destroy everything and they can't do anything about him. So
evil Meglaro.
So they put on some Lurium metal helmets.
Real
Lurium. What's that?
It's real tinfoil.
Real tinfoil, because it scrambles the ability of Saturn Girl or this creature to read thoughts or have your thoughts being controlled.
Unfortunately, once again, the plan is undermined. Someone hears about it and shows up with the mighty Z-Ray that allows them to dissolve the tinfoil helmets.
Sprachen Z-Rays.
Oh, no.
Or maybe you say it correctly. Sprachen Z-Rays.
Sprachen Z-Rays.
Yes, which melt their helmets and the bad guy gets away. Again, another thing that's interesting is here's a helmet that is blocking people's ability to read you. Now, I don't know when tinfoil hats became a popular concept.
1962.
Was it?
With Adventure Comics number 3.
Do you think this is the first appearance of a tinfoil helmet?
I don't, but I think it's interesting to see it in play here.
Well, and especially when considering what? 10 years later, Magneto shows up with a helmet that blocks the ability of Professor X to read or control his mind.
I don't know about the helmet. Magneto himself would show up the next year.
Oh, in 63.
X-Men 1 was 1963. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, I just find that fascinating that we see all of these things happening, and it really can tell the future.
It's telling the future.
So after this third mishap, Chameleon Boy figures it out. He goes, "Oh my gosh, that ship was from the planet Bismal. Therefore, Matter Eater Lad, you are the spy." And Matter Eater Lad chomps through some grating and escapes.
You'll never catch me. You'll never catch me. I can chew through anything. Yeah, ha, ha, ha.
But come on, Matter Eater Lad is a long-time member of the Legion of Superheroes. Even today, people look at him and go, "What?" You know, when they look at what are the goofiest powers in the universe, Matter Eater Lad will always pop up on the list at some point.
Matter Eater Lad.
Yeah, because he just eats anything and everything.
Right, and yeah, it's an okay power.
I mean, it's an okay power, but it's certainly weird. But I mean, so he can't be the spy.
He can't, and you know why?
Why?
There technically is no spy.
What?
There is no traitor to the Legion of Superheroes. There is, in fact, a tiny man with a radio in Sunboy's ankle.
That's what I want to go around telling people. You know, there's a tiny little man in my ankle. There's a tiny little man in
put on your Lurium helmet when you tell them that story.
There's a tiny little man in my pants.
But
yeah,
the best part is that was
this.
covered by Dirk's HMO.
Explain this.
Well, you recall the fourth dimensional surgery.
Oh yeah, we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about how you insert these little capsules that heal you up.
Exactly. Dr. Landro, who performed the fourth dimensional surgery, is actually a jerk.
Yeah, he's a member of some crime organization, and he has a shrink ray, and we'll talk more about the shrink ray in just a moment. But he shrinks a man in a capsule down to size, and this man can hear everything that's going on in the Legion Clubhouse, and he's transmitting it out. Mm-hmm. And Brainiac discovers this and passes a message to Matter Eater Lad, and the two of them work together to try to capture this group of people.
And that's the thing. One of the main clues was earlier in the book, when Sunboy was running around in his tinfoil hat, he pointed out that his ankle still hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Which meant that he wasn't being healed by the capsule.
Yeah, he should have been fully healed by the time he came back from medical leave.
That's right. You know why? Fourth-dimensional capsules.
Yes, fourth-dimensional capsules. I knew at the minute that somebody enters the scene called Dr. Landro, he was the bad guy.
Yeah, I wonder what that's an anagram for.
I don't know. What is an anagram for?
Drell.
Drolnon. Curse you, Drolnon. Here is the best part. Well, there's two. Here is the best part of this Legion of Superheroes series. A couple of episodes ago, I talked about how up until 300, that the Legion of Superheroes were like this MacGuffin thing so that Superboy could work out all of his issues as a young hero, and that they really only showed up briefly for these weird moments.
Right.
Such a turn of events, as in the final page and a half, final 2 panels of the issue, Superboy is there doing the job so that all the other Legionnaires can be distracted, and so that the little tiny man doesn't let the bad guys in on the secret. And so you cut to your little screen where you can see what all the heroes are doing. He goes, "Here's Superboy. We had him come from the past to take down the bad guys. And now here's Superboy flying 100 million years into the future to dispose of this tiny, gross little brain in a sphere." And I just love the fact that it's clearly a Legion of Superheroes story with Superboy.
With Superboy as the little, the bits and pieces. Oh, look, it turns out the shocking reveal. It's a complete reversal of that trend. He becomes he's the MacGuffin here for that Legion tale.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. I was just like, oh, this is perfect. Now, the one thing that's a little weird, and it is something that continues well into the future of Legion tales, is that these kids have some deep emotional things that they really need a Legion of Superheroes therapist on their HMO.
They do. They definitely need Counselor Lass.
Yeah. I mean, I really thought that at one point that's what Saturn Girl was supposed to be, kind of like their Deanna Troi of the team. But man, Brainiac 5 generations later, is still lamenting and still under such guilt over what his ancestor did, 1,000 years ago.
Right. Well, and later on, it's revealed that it's not just one ancestor. The first 4 Brainiacs were all nutsy cuckoo.
And where are they from? Kulu?
They're from planet Hulu, yes.
Yes. And
where you can watch unlimited shows as long as you're okay with a commercial every 20 minutes.
But aren't all Brainiacs Kulans? Aren't they all evil? And he's the only one that is ever good?
Not at this point. Coluans are complicated.
Coluans, man, I could go for a Coluan right now.
Not a Kalua.
Oh.
Coluan. Coluans are complicated in some realities, and I want to say that in the Reboot Legion on Earth 247, that the Coluans are all evil.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point in time, they are basically just another planet of hats who have one super evil guy in their past, and then Brainiac trying to make up for the whole thing. And at one point in this issue, Matter Eater Lad actually calls it out and says, Brainiac's great-great-great-great-grandfather was an evil thing. Maybe he's our traitor too.
He's the one that created the shrinking ray that made all this possible.
He's todally our traitor, man. That's what happened.
If you could think of like what, for Brainiac 5, Brainiac is like the worst name he can have. In today's world, what would be like the worst name you could have that everyone would just look at you and go, oh my gosh?
Hitler?
Actually, I would probably agree with you. And you wouldn't think that there would be that many Hitlers around. But there are still today people that have the last name Hitler. And it's fascinating. There's a documentary out called Meet the Hitlers. There was also I don't remember if it was 99% Invisible. Yeah. I don't know if it was a 99% Invisible or This American Life or one of those things, where they actually interviewed 2 women who grew up with the last name Hitler, and they talk about why the family, generations, they didn't change the name after World War II. And basically, the father after World War II was like, why am I going to let this one guy ruin our whole family lineage? Because their lineage had gone all the way back to like Mayflower Pilgrim times, and that there was a Hitler that fought during the Revolutionary War and had done all these great things and was a real hero in the Revolutionary Army. And they're like, why should we let Hitler ruin it for all the rest of us Hitlers? So they kept it around, and the daughters eventually married, and they convinced their husbands to allow them to change their name to Hitler last name, Hitler hyphen whatever. But then they decided that it was too much to put that burden onto their children, even though their parents' parents had done that, for a couple of generations. And so essentially the Hitler name is going to die out in the next 20, 30 years. But I think it's fascinating that there are people that, because you have this last name, just like Brainiac, are still dealing with that generations later.
That is kind of fascinating. And really, when you think about it, the idea of calling yourself Brainiac 5 to, take it back, basically, especially since Brainiac is a title rather than your actual family name. I mean, his family name is Dox, but that's actually an evil word, too. I think that the idea of Brainiac 5 being a hero to try and reclaim that name is a strong one, and it kind of gives his character that little extra edge. I think there's a reason why when you say who are the quintessential Legionnaires, it's usually the core 3, Brainiac 5.
Brainiac 5 and Bouncing Boy.
And the goofy ones, Bouncing Boy, Matter Eater Lad are the ones that have no other, like Triplicate Girl. There aren't really any other characters in the world whose power is quite like Triplicate Girl.
Right. So I just find that interesting. I find that fascinating. And I really like that in this issue, Superboy is the MacGuffin.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/majorspoilers.
Matthew, this issue features a horrible, horrible moment, and I want to let our listeners know that something bad is about to happen.
Something very bad and something unexpected, and in 1963 is almost unheard of.
Adventure Comics number 304, The Stolen Superpowers. Published January 1963. Written by Jerry Siegel with art by John Forte. A supercomputer predicts a Legionnaire's death. Can Saturn Girl undermine such a terrible prophecy?
If ever anyone wanted proof that voter fraud occurs, one only needs to look at Adventure Comics number 304, where Saturn Girl, who has the ability to not only read people's minds, but to control people, forces the entire Legion of Superheroes to vote for her against their will, so she becomes the president.
The leader of the Legion.
Sure. President of the Legion, leader of the Legion.
She wins unanimously.
Which is odd.
It is very odd because Legion tradition states that you don't necessarily vote for yourself in most situations.
You would think that Imra is one of the nicest people you've ever met. Every time we've met her, she's been so nice, so polite, such a good person, somebody that you would actually want to hang out with, whether she's reading your mind or not. And then when she becomes leader of the Legion, man, she just like forces everyone to do the will of her Iron Fist.
Yep. She spends 200,000 space bucks to make medallions and force them to wear the medallions and screams at them.
But the medallions are not just medallions. They are medallions that feature her likeness on them.
Yep. They are Saturn Girl faces. So every Legionnaire is now a Legion of Saturn Girler.
Then she goes and says, you guys have to do what I tell you to do. So you, Triplicate Girl, do this. You, Ultra Boy, do that. And if you don't do it to the exact letter and you don't do it the way I tell you to do it, you are suspended for 30 days. Turn in your badge.
Not small enough, shrinking mallet. You're forbidden to shrink for 90 days.
Not big enough, Colossal Boy. 24 days in the pen for you. Meanwhile, here's the crazy thing. She's been using these medallions to siphon off all of the power of the Legion of Superheroes.
Yep, and she can now duplicate all of their powers.
Who knew that this rainbow metal, this $200,000 piece of rainbow metal, could have all of those powers?
Well, apparently Imra did.
Well, apparently she does, and we'll find out why in a little bit. But there are a couple of things that I want to point out in this. First of all, this issue has a printing error. It's not the first time that this will happen. It's not the last time that this will happen. But in the post-voting bliss, as everyone's sitting around talking about how Saturn Girl was able to get in unanimously, Brainiac 5's skin is blue instead of green.
Yep.
And I just want to point that out because it's an odd printing error because his hands are green.
Yes.
There's other green on the panel on the page. His face is blue.
Well, and with the 4-color printing of the 1960s, a colorist would actually have had to go in and mark it to be, I don't remember what it is. It's like R3YB or something.
Yeah.
To have it be green. But it's also interesting to see him with a blue face because it then makes you wonder how freaky would it have been if Brainiac 5 was blue. It
would have been very weird. But I think the problem is the reason why you can't make his skin blue all the time or ever is because too often the backgrounds are blue and it would look like he had a transparent head.
Yeah. And, if you keep him green, you can actually chroma key his face out like Ty.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So now Saturn Girl has all the powers of the Legion except for Superboy and Supergirl, who were in other time dimensions.
Right. Which, if you have the powers of Ultra Boy, you technically have the powers of Superboy and Supergirl.
Right. And she does point that out. And while she's still chastising these, I mean, she has turned into the worst president of all time. Well, maybe not the worst president of all time. I'm sorry, the worst leader of all time.
But while I'll handle this emergency myself.
But while she's chastising them, Commander Loring pops on the screen and announces an emergency that's happening. Commander Loring. Now, I know that Jerry Siegel likes to borrow names and things. But I cannot help but when I saw Commander Loring go, oh my gosh, is this a descendant of Jean Loring? But I wonder, when did Jean Loring show up on the screen?
Well, the Atom appeared in 1961. I want to say it was in that first appearance of the Atom, like Showcase 34, maybe?
And so what year would that be?
1961.
So Commander Loring, Jean dies, goes crazy.
Right. But not for decades.
Not for decades. It just made me wonder, oh my gosh, is this a descendant of Jean Loring?
Or is there some guy floating around whose name is Loring, and they're like, you know whose name we should use? We should use Bob Loring's name.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
And his cousin, Ed Docks.
So the problem is this really bad guy, this really bad dude has escaped. And he's out in space, and he's got his robot army assembled, which kind of look like a lot of Doom Patrol robot mans.
Yeah, Zarian the Conqueror.
Problem is, if anyone attacks, and this is where the twist in the story comes. At the very beginning of this issue, a little probe landed, and there was this message inside that only Saturn Girl read that said, in an upcoming mission, a member of the Legion of Superheroes is going to die.
Dun, dun.
And so for Imra, she is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice and let herself be killed so the rest of the Legionnaires can live.
Unfortunately,
I think that's pretty noble.
It is very noble, but there's only one problem and one thing that she has forgotten.
Yeah, and you would think it would be very hard for Imra to forget this.
Well, considering, yeah, but she has forgotten the 14th Legionnaire, that man being Mon-El, the invisible phantom who floats around the Legion Clubhouse at this point in time in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
And was looking over her shoulder, which, by the way,
creepy.
Can I just say creepy? Yeah.
Well, that's why there's all the bad guys
shoulder.
are in the Phantom Zone.
Our computer machine predicts a Legionnaire member will die soon. I hear that note as in the voice of
B9?
Gene Roddenberry's wife.
Oh, okay.
You know, the computer from season 2 Star Trek.
Yeah. Actually, from season 2 Star Trek and forward until her death.
Majel Barrett.
Mm-hmm.
But Mon-El gave the information over to Lightning Lad, one of the other founding Legionnaires.
Now, keep in mind, when Saturn Girl took their powers, she didn't completely drain them. She just has all their powers, and she's put them all on suspension. And she's told them, you are not to participate in any Legion missions until your 30 days are up. And if you do, you're out. But Lightning Lad, who has communicated with Mon-El, flies out into space, and he attacks the ship and destroys it. But in the process, OMG, 1963, the death of Lightning Lad.
Lightning Lad destroys Zarian's craft, but is hit by a freeze ray and killed. He dies in her arms. And of course, after being killed in comic books, you only have 10, maybe 15 minutes to live. So
or a couple of hours because they have to fly back to Earth.
They fly back to Earth, and then he tells her the story, of everything that happened and how Mon-El was the thing. And of course, he's dead.
So Spider-Man, we've already seen the death of Uncle Ben.
Mm-hmm. But that's part of the origin. I mean, that's like saying we saw the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne.
Right.
It's another MacGuffin. It's a plot point at that point. The first superhero to die was probably Archie Comics' The Comet in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a really weird, minor one-off thing. And of course, he later came back, but then who doesn't? This may be one of the first handful of actual comic book superhero type deaths.
And is it a Valiant death? And by Valiant, I don't mean Valiant Comics.
Well, everybody in Valiant Comics dies. I think it is because he basically steps in to save Saturn Girl.
Mm-hmm.
He basically says, "Better me than you."
Yeah. Choke. I'm dying. Gasp. Goodbye.
Well, it's the 60s.
It is, but it is the 60s, and it is teenagers.
And they say the D word. They say Lightning Lad is dead.
Oh, no, because he is dead. He is dead. I mean, and we are just a few years, like 4 years, 5 years out from their first introduction. And so Lightning Lad is this ingrained member that any kid worth his salt who's reading Adventure Comics knows whose Lightning Lad is. And so here is the death of someone close to you in a comic book.
This would be like if Iron Man cacked out in the Avengers, or if the Justice League suddenly lost the Flash.
Well, so what else is going on in this time period? I mean, these kids, this story is 10 years after Korean War. Vietnam hasn't really kicked into a high gear or really started yet.
Yep.
But it feels like this issue is trying to get readers to understand the meaning of death or to recognize a sacrifice that has been made.
I can definitely see that. And I think it works, honestly. I mean, this is something that comic books 50 years out of their time frame can be really tough to actually approach and understand. But when they place his body in a casket with lightning eternally crashing across his corpse,
put him in a glass coffin, people walk by him just like Lennon.
All the flags of the United Planets are at half-mast, and they put up the first of many statues.
Well, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that in a future episode, because there are a lot of statues in that clubhouse even before members die.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, so that's a little weird.
Well, those were living statues.
Oh, okay.
These are dead statues.
These are the ones that panhandle for money on the side of the street.
These are different statues.
Different living statues? Okay. All right. The other thing that is really important to point out is the year that Lightning Lad dies is 2965.
Right.
The year that this book was published, 1963.
So it's 1,002 years in the future.
1,002 years in the future. And when it comes time for the funeral, Mon-El is able to come out of the Phantom Zone for a little bit. Superboy comes from the past. Supergirl arrives. And for whatever reason, Lori Lamera shows up. Yep. Am I missing something why she would show up?
She's a Superman supporting character.
But why would she show up? I mean, there's no reason for her to show up. Why didn't Lana Lang show up? Where's Pete Ross?
Right.
Pete Ross makes
sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. This may actually be the first Lori Lamaris in the future, now that I think of it. Unless something happened in a Superman issue that we haven't seen.
That's true. That is true.
There are a few things where it's like, hey, here's 2 panels of the Legion in the middle of Superman's death battle with Brainiac, where we're just like, okay, well, maybe not so much.
Here's another thing that I think is really important to take away in this specific issue. We talked early on when the Legion first appeared that there was 3 leaders, Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, and Saturn Girl. And at the time, we marveled that in this leadership role, one of them was a woman.
Yep.
And in just a few years later, 5 years later, we have a single leader who is a woman.
Yep. Saturn Girl in this issue is elected Legion leader. Now, is there an asterisk next to that because she may have used her psionic powers? Yes, but there's also the fact that she continues being Legion leader for, in story, 2 years. It's something where the team is fine with the girl being in charge. And at this point, she is almost the girl because we haven't heard from Triplicate Girl or Shrinking Violet for more than a panel in like 6 issues.
Yeah, they don't talk much.
They don't. And, Phantom Girl is literally a phantom. I can't remember the last time we even saw her.
I see what you did there.
And she's a phantom because you can't see her. But it's interesting to see that, they're taking their future setting liberally and going, hey, we can do this. We can get away with it, too, because it's 2965 and not 1963.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really cool and really important.
But is Lightning Lad really dead?
Is Lightning Lad really dead? Because, my gosh, not to spoil anything, but in the final panel, they do say, see forthcoming issues of Adventure Comics for the surprising answer. And it's like, I can see
the only surprise would be if the answer is yes.
I can see them wanting to string readers along so that they keep buying Adventure Comics. But my gosh, people today complain about how a character dies and then like less than a year later he's back. Guess what's coming in future installments of Legion Clubhouse?
But this is before that became a trope.
I know, right?
And remember, there's a rule that we haven't talked about yet, and I think that it's going to start becoming a thing. Where goeth the Legion, there goeth the rest of comics.
Oh, okay. Kind of like that saying about whichever way the porn industry goes, that's the way the rest of consumer technology goes.
Kind of like that, only not gross.
Well, Matthew, we have reached the end of another Legion Clubhouse.
It's so good to have this time.
What do we take away this episode?
Well, I think we've learned that just because somebody is the new guy doesn't mean that they are immediately suspect.
Oh, we've also got that characters in comics can die.
Mm-hmm. That the things that your grandfather did may make you guilty, but they aren't necessarily your responsibility. And it's rude to vote for yourself.
And most importantly, it's totally okay to have a woman president. I mean, a woman leader of superheroes, of legions. All right, everyone, that wraps it up for this installment of the Legion of Superheroes. Hope you enjoyed it. Check out more. Follow us on Twitter on Legion Clubhouse. Check out our website, majorspoilers.com. Make sure you're signing up for that Patreon, patreon.com/majorspoilers. And until next time, I'm Podcasting Boy.
And I'm Glad Lad.
Ew.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.